I'll tell you what, after the absolute nightmare that was the design process for that Midi-Scale Venator, this MC80 Liberty was a really nice change of pace, and it honestly turned out way better than I ever could have expected it to. And before you ask, yes, it is in scale with the 2025 Home 1. In fact, it is within less than half a stud of being perfectly to scale with it. As always, there were some design compromises that just had to be made, and we'll get into what those were later on in the video, but let me start off by saying, if any of you are at all interested in building this for yourself, there is a link in the description to the Rebrickable page. Whether you just really like Mon Calamari cruisers or you want to beef up your Rebel Navy, this ship will definitely not disappoint. I personally was very much not at all disappointed with how this one turned out. I think that this one is my best MOC so far, and I know it's just a Mon Calamari cruiser, so it's not like as exciting as a Venator or anything, but in terms of screen accuracy, I think that this one takes the cake out of everything that I've done on Rebrickable. And speaking of screen accuracy, this was actually the first class of ship to be blown up by the second Death Star, so if you want to recreate an Endor diorama or anything, this is kind of an important one to have. Anyways, with that shoehorned in, let's talk about the design of this thing. As you can see here, it pairs really nicely with the official LEGO Home 1. It's got a lot of the same stylistic choices, the same coloring, the same greebling details, the same types of piece usages. You know, the goal was to look at it and say, wow, that looks like it was explicitly designed to go alongside that Home 1, and I think that I managed to do that pretty well. However, I must admit, I think that the undercarriage of the Liberty cruiser here totally blows the Home 1 out of the water, which, frankly, that's the only department that it completely blows the LEGO model out of the water in, because LEGO just did such a fantastic job on that Home 1, but I have always been one to enjoy the underside of the ship. I think that the undersides of the ships are just as important as the top sides. I always want to make sure that they look just as good as the top side, and here I think that I managed to accomplish that very well. And as I've been kind of hinting at throughout the video, it also scales very well with the 2024 Star Destroyer. I just think it's so cool to have a Rebel ship next to a Star Destroyer and just realize the Empire went big with their stuff. Now, aside from just looking good next to some of the official LEGO sets, this Liberty also has a great deal of customizability. I mean, the weathering patterns obviously are easy enough to customize and move around however you want, but in addition to that, a lot of these little bumps on the surface of the ship are movable, so you can set their distance from the wings, you can change the angle if you want. I mean, the Liberty was a very asymmetrical ship. A lot of these bumps weren't perfectly straight up and down, and they were not quite symmetrical side to side. So, while it's certainly not the most groundbreaking feature by any stretch of the imagination, if you're somebody who likes a little bit more customizability, I think it was a nice touch. Or you can just leave them laser straight and symmetrical if you want. I mean, that's always an option too, of course. But as fun as talking about design features might be, to me, the most important part of any LEGO build is always the stability. How strong, how durable is a MOC? And I'm very pleased to say that this thing is very durable. This is a tank. I mean, not literally, it's a Starcruiser, obviously, but it is very strong. This thing has like almost no empty space on the inside. It is solid as a rock. As you can see, I'm being very rough with it here, and other than like a greeble or two, this thing is not going anywhere. This thing is very strong. It can go through a lot. I mean, assuming that they hadn't been picking their nose or anything just before, I would be perfectly fine handing this to a 4-year-old to play with. You can hold this cruiser from like 99% of the locations on this build. The wings don't have any Technic structure in them, they're just brick built, so if you're really rough with it while you're holding it on the wings might come off, but if you are just holding it by the wings, you know, you pick it up by the wings, you're not going to have an issue there. So yeah, a very, very durable build. If you've been burned before by purchasing a mock design online and then you build it and it just completely falls apart on you, this is not going to have that problem. Now, let's talk about some of those design compromises. The biggest one is probably going to be the color. Depending on the source material that you look at, the MC Liberty is sometimes depicted as being more of a white than a light gray. And honestly, looking at it, I do think that it is a lighter shade of gray than the Home one, but ultimately I wanted it to match the Home one really well, so I just went with a light gray. And I mean, light gray versus really, really light gray, there's not much of a difference. I think that the gray works just fine. The second compromise is going to be the bumpiness of the Liberty. In universe, the Liberty is a much thinner ship than the Home one. So while LEGO was able to pack in a lot of like ridges and bumpiness on the Midi-Scale Home 1 model, I wanted to make sure that this one was thin in comparison to the Home 1, so it sacrificed a lot of that texture with it. But I mean, you've been watching the video this whole time, you can see it's still got a fair amount of ridges and humps and stuff. Overall, I am very pleased with how this turned out, especially in terms of stability. You know, there are a multitude of fantastic looking MOCs out there on the internet, on Rebrickable, but, you know, you see them, they look really good, but I don't trust digital only MOCs. I will only ever trust a MOC if I've seen somebody build it and I can say, okay, yeah, that's not going to fall apart on me. And, you know, I'll be completely honest, there are some parts in the instructions where, you know, your pieces are only attached by 1 or 2 studs before you reinforce them. So during the building process, it might seem a little sketchy, but once it all comes together, it really shouldn't be giving you any trouble at all. So if you're at all interested in owning an MC80 Liberty, please go and check out the link in the description. The instructions are $3, and depending on how savvy you are with Bricklink, you can probably get all the parts together for like $100, $120-ish. And if the MC80 Liberty is not your fancy, then maybe this Venator or Munificent or any of my other MOCs are. You can check out a full playlist of everything that I've done so far, coming up on the end screen right now. And I mean, there will be some other video here that you can click on if you want. I'm not going to stop you, and the guy sitting behind you right now isn't going to stop you. So yeah, that's right, look behind you. Haha, made you look, you dork.